Kick off the morning with some very interesting developments according to The Athletic regarding the future of Alexander Isak. Now, David Ornstein is reporting the striker is adamant he'll never play for the club again. And as far as he's concerned, his Newcastle career is over, regardless of whether he gets a move this window or not. Now, we're still to confirm this story, but The Athletic is saying he has got no desire to reintegrate with the squad. And after not being offered a new contract last summer, he made it clear to the club that it would be his final season at St James's Park. Well, let's talk to Jay Bothroyd about this now. Jay, potentially huge news here. What's your take on that?
Tom, I just want to say one thing before we go into this. You were telling me that Newcastle are favourites to win the league off air. Can we just elaborate on that, please?
We can't elaborate on that. I said, at the end of last season, I said next season, which is now this season, Newcastle will be in a position to win the league. I didn't see the summer going the way it has.
Definitely just said to me over there, they'll win the league.
I did not say we. I don't need to say we. You support Sunderland, but I said Newcastle would win the league at the end of last season. But things haven't gone their way so far. But there is time for that to change.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Now, but to make that change, Jay, you might agree, they need to turn things round with Isak.
No, definitely. Obviously, this situation now has got really sticky. And one thing I would say is that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what's been said. We don't know what promises has been made. All we know at the moment is what we've heard from, the Newcastle camp, and then, there's hearsay about Isak from Isak's camp. But ultimately, I think that he should have remained professional. He is attending training, and you can't say I'm never going to play for Newcastle again, because if he doesn't make that move, then he's going to want to play. Every footballer wants to play matches. So I think that was a bit reckless, that talk, but ultimately it's a difficult situation for him.
Remember, everyone watching at home, scan that QR code there. You can leave voice notes, send us a WhatsApp message. QR code there, you can get in touch via social media, because we use particularly Newcastle fans on this one, but also Liverpool fans, football fans in general. Jay, have you ever been in a situation where a player has refused to play for a club?
I haven't been in a situation where players refuse to play for a club, but I've been in a sticky situation when I was at Cardiff. And I went to Cardiff in my second year, and I said to Cardiff, I want a new deal. I've been playing well. I'm one of the first names on the team sheet. I want to get a good contract to put me up there with some of the higher earners, and they declined it. And I vented my. I was upset. I vented my anger to them, but they were just adamant that they weren't going to give me one. And then in my final season, the season that I got called into the England squad and was scoring lots of goals, again playing really well, then they were trying to bully me into signing a contract, and I said, no, it doesn't work like that. And so that was a bit of a difficult situation, but fans don't know that, and some fans were holding me accountable. But ultimately, I wanted to commit my future to Cardiff the season before. They didn't want me to. They didn't feel like I justified a new contract, and they told me no.
Well, talking of fans, a lot of you getting in touch, and that's exactly what we want. We can hear from one now, actually, because Pete Davey, who's also on the board of the Newcastle Supporters Trust, joins us right now. Right, Pete, good morning to you. Thanks for coming on. This situation for Newcastle, do you see it as going from bad to worse right now?
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation to be in as a Newcastle United fan. The summer hasn't been a good one in itself already. On top of that, you've got this situation of Alexander Isak, which doesn't seem to be letting up at all. And yeah, it's not an ideal situation for us as Newcastle United fans, because we should be right now with 4 days to go before the season starts. Our mind should be fully set on Aston Villa away on Saturday. But instead, we've got this saga that's just continuing on and on and on. And I have to say, it's been handled really, really poorly from my perspective with regards to Alexander Isak. I know Jay's made a couple of points on there just before I came on, and I fully agree. I really do think that him and his agent has handled this situation poorly.
With that in mind, is there any way back from him now?
Well, if you ask Newcastle United fans, and I've spoke to many have voiced their opinions on Alexander Isak, even just this morning. There doesn't seem to be a way back for Alexander Isak. And there's two sides to the coin here in this situation, because I do feel that he has burnt his bridges. And I do feel like he's doubled down on this situation, because he's put all his cards out, not playing at Celtic, then not travelling to pre-season tour. On top of that, he's now having to double down and saying he's never playing for the club again, because it doesn't look like at this point that Liverpool are going to come back in with a second bid. But, you know, I'm with the club on this one as well, because everyone's talking about Alexander Isak, you know, being one of the best strikers in the world, and he is absolutely that. And talking about he deserves a wage befitting of that.
Hold on, Pete. Do you not think that Eddie Howe and the club need to, you know, they have some responsibility as well, because there was a lot of, you know, when Isak first went back, he's carrying a thigh injury. Then it was like his head's not right. Then he handed in the transfer request. Then they sent him home. And then he went to go and do his own training at Real Sociedad. I feel like both parties have a part to play in this. What do you think?
Well, I actually think Eddie Howe is protecting him in this situation. I think Eddie Howe has looked out for him, even though he's behaved the way he has. I do think Eddie Howe has looked out for him and tried to, you know, protect the player, because
the way you would protect a player,
he wants him there.
But the way you would protect a player is by keeping the player with the squad. When you just ostracize him and send him back to train by himself, that's not keeping the player happy. No player wants to train by themselves.
This badge right here is Newcastle United. Nobody's bigger than the club. If a player is behaving in that manner, there is no way that he can just be reintegrated into that squad without certain processes going through. Jay, you will know this. You've played the game. You know and have seen players that have behaved in this manner going back. This right here is the club. Nobody's bigger than that. And he shouldn't just have a divine right to come back in after he's behaved in that way. There should, well, be a process for that. The club have a value on his head. He is considered one of the best strikers in the world. He is valued at a certain fee, as well as the fact that he's burnt his bridges and maybe should well leave the club. At the same time, Newcastle United are absolutely well in their rights to demand a value on that, and I think that's been missed in all of this conversation. There's a value on his head. If the club that wants him don't meet that value, then he doesn't leave. But his behaviours in between that are not acceptable.
And you're 100% right. There is a value on Isak, and that value is put out there by Newcastle, right? But Newcastle could have avoided this as well by just selling him. If he say he wants to leave, what's the point in keeping a player that doesn't want to be there? And to allude to what you were saying about Isak, we don't know, and you don't know, the fans don't know what has been promised behind closed doors. We've heard of loads of situations with Harry Kane getting promised handshakes and whatnot, and at the end of the day, you don't know what's going on. All you hear is what the club has put out there. So I think it's unfair to just judge Isak and say he's the bad guy in all this. I think both parties have their part to play.
Right. Look, there's historical things, like you said, we don't know everything. And there's historical things that are now starting to come out from before the end of the season and so on that may have well have got us to that point. And absolutely right. The club are responsible to a point. But the behaviour and what we're talking about right now is the outburst of the player. So I can only talk about the outburst of the player right now. Now, to answer your initial point, is that why are Newcastle not just selling him and moving on? Well, for me, I think Newcastle United need to make a stand here. For me as a fan and for the club, they do not want to create a pathway for players to think that they can just behave like this and that's their way out of the club. Newcastle United need to hold their ground and say, hold on a second, this is not how players leave Newcastle United. You have to do it in a proper manner. You have to do it in a proper way. So actually, there are two sides to the coin, and I do believe this is why Newcastle are being very staunch right now and going, no, this is the value, this is what you need to pay in order for you to get your player and for Isak to leave the club. That's where it is.
Pete, Sky Sports News is on in pretty much every training ground up and down the country. There is a chance that Alexander Isak is watching this right now. On behalf of the supporters, what's your message to him?
Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Alexander Isak at some point will get his move, but you're a professional footballer. Get your head down, Get yourself back into the training, get yourself back into the games, do what you do best. Get yourself on the football pitch, score goals and play 100% for the team that you are currently contracted to, Newcastle United.
Pete, thank you.
Take care.
Jay, just a final point on this for now anyway, because there's something new every day. But how realistic is it that it gets to the end of the transfer window, Alexander Isak hasn't had a move, so he stays at Newcastle and doesn't play?
I think,
Very rare.
Yeah.